G'day, ZiggyD here, live on Path of Exile's patch 0.10.2, and in this video I'm going to be showing off and explaining Incinerate. As you can see, I've just leveled up a witch here to level 10 and killed Brutus, which is the quest now to get Incinerate. I haven't checked it on other classes. I imagine it's also available on the Templar and Shadow, but I'm not sure which quest through. But if you want to rush for one quickly, then you can just level a witch to level 10 and kill Brutus and get your Incinerate spell, and then you can palm it off to an ult or something like that if you're keen to try it out. So the first thing I want to show off is the 4 stages of Incinerate. So this spell is interesting. It works exactly like a channeled spell. There's no like channel mechanic in Path of Exile, but it achieves the same thing really. You have to stand still and channel the spell in order to achieve its like full, maximum potency. So what happens is there's 4 stages. As you can see, as I'm casting, there's a little burst of fire around me every so often, every about a second or so. The first stage does the least amount of damage, which is 17.8 here, and then it increases by 80% damage each time that you move through one of those stages. Now I have no idea what quality does on this gem. I haven't seen a quality gem of this, obviously. I'm sure there's some people that have tested that with GCPs, and if you have seen anything about that, it'd be cool if you could chuck that in the comments below and let me know about it. But I'll do some research anyway, and I'll let you guys know if I find out anything about that. So the 4 stages, basically the longer you stand still, the longer you can tank and stand still and cast on mobs, the more damage you're going to do. So let's go ahead and take a look at that on a nice mob pack somewhere. So here we've got a nice mob pack. I'm going to have to pop a mana potion because it takes a fair bit of mana. As you can see, it does quite a bit of damage, and as you move through the stages, it does a ton of damage and spreads out in AoE as well. It increases its AoE. Now it's not an AoE spell itself actually, it doesn't have an area of effect tag, so I'll get to that in a little bit because that's an important thing to note. But basically, you have to be able to support the mana costs to be able to stand there and channel. You have to not get interrupted, so I think cast interruption avoidance, which there's some passives for that somewhere in the witch area that allow you to avoid being interrupted while you're casting, are going to be very important, and also just being tanky in general. I'm thinking heading over into the Templar area and making a nice sort of tanky standstill, up in mobs' faces, almost melee ability sort of build will be pretty strong for this, though there are some ways to make this increased in range, and I'll talk about that in a little second. So let's go ahead and take a look at the actual tags of the spell, because that's the most important thing really when you're trying to think about what you can do with it in the end game. So it has fire, spell, and then the most interesting one that I find is projectile. So fire and spell just mean what sort of damage nodes affect it. So this increased fire damage obviously affects fire. Anything that is related to the fire tag will affect this spell. As spell, since it's also a spell, you get things like cast speed and spell critical damage, spell damage, spell critical chance. Anything that affects spells like that will also affect it. Now, the interesting thing to note about cast speed with this spell is that the faster your cast speed, the quicker you're going to be able to move through the stages. So it's very hard to test it with low level gear like this, but I've been able to sort of try a 5% increased cast speed. I think it's going to be much more noticeable when you can stack a lot of it through passives and gear. However, it's also going to be a lot more mana hungry. So that means you're getting to the final stage quicker. You're getting to your maximum damage potency quicker, but it's going to consume your mana at a much faster rate. And this is a mana hungry spell. Mana cost is 4, but since it chews it through it so quickly, you can see I pretty much wipe out my mana very quickly here. And I'm stacking 2 mana rings and the worst ever power amulet that I've ever seen, but I wanted to get something to increase that mana regeneration there. But I just have to say, before I move on, this spell is awesome. I haven't mentioned that yet, but just ever since I first picked it up and first cast it, I'm like, yeah, that's cool. That's exactly what you want with the spell. Some spells like Firestorm are really lackluster and feel really crappy when you first cast them. They get better in the late game as you start adding supports to them, but Incinerate feels awesome right from the get-go. So I think that's pretty important, and I'm sure we're going to start seeing some builds around this pretty soon. I might even take a look at making a build for it myself. This is an interesting point here. See, I'm almost out of mana, but I can obviously keep casting now. That seems really good, right? But you can't move through the stages unless you cast continuously. So you can't do this and then move through the stages. You have to be able to cast continually without running out of mana, without getting interrupted, in order to move through the stages. So your mana regen or your mana leech from the spell through a support gem is going to have to exceed the costs if you really want to maintain it, or you're going to have to be chowing down on those mana potions. So the other most important thing about this spell by far is that it counts as a projectile. So any of you guys who are familiar with Freezing Pulsed or have made a Freezing Pulsed build know that increased projectile speed allows you to make Freezing Pulse go further. So as you can see, the maximum range on Incinerate's pretty low, but with increased projectile speed, not only does those projectiles move faster, so each one of these is a projectile if I try and cast them one by one there, but they're also going to move further. So, you know, if I increase my projectile speed by 20%, instead of ending just there on that piece of grass, it's probably going to end somewhere out here. Now that's really important for this spell, because although you can't increase its AoE besides moving through the stages of it, if you can increase its projectile speed, you're going to be able to hit a much larger group of enemies much further away, and you're also going to be able to keep yourself safe. You're not going to have to be right up in melee distance. So I just want to do, before I finish up this video, because those are the main points for this, but I want to just show if I can avoid dying. Let's kill off all these mobs first while I just mentioned some other things. So what sort of supports are you going to be looking for this? I think Mana Leech is going to be an important support. Faster casting maybe in some niche builds where you have a lot of mana and a lot of mana regeneration. I think some sort of Eldritch Battery build is going to be almost a necessity for this, because that's the only way to get really high mana regeneration. As you can see, I'm like having real mana issues here. I'm stacking a ton of mana already, and this spell hasn't even been leveled yet, so it's level 1. So lots of mana builds I think are going to be really important. Eldritch Battery, you know, with the regeneration aura, with the energy shield aura to get lots and lots of energy shield and lots of regeneration, I think going to be crucial to making this skill viable, and you know, also being tanky, being able to stand there. And increased projectile speed support gem I think will be very important. You don't need anything like pierce, because it is a natively piercing spell itself. So I really need some mana potions. Let's take a little trip back to town, and then I'll when I'm full of mana, we'll go kill Kuduku just for a bit of fun. This guy's got a pretty large life pool, so we can sort of see how the damage increases throughout the stages. There we go. Pretty easy kill really of Kuduku there. So pretty cool stuff. I'm pretty excited for this spell, and I'm very excited to see the builds that people come up with, you know, around it and making it good. And you know, 2 spell totems with a, you know, dual spell totem build, double Incinerate with knockback on them. There's a lot of potential for interesting builds with this skill, let's just say that. Anyway, that's pretty much it. Hopefully you guys have fun playing with this skill, and hopefully this has given you some ideas on what you can do with your new Incinerate build. I'm ZiggyD, and thanks for watching.